Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. This is a meeting to consider applications for minor variance and consent. I'll just wait. Okay. Good evening once again. This is a meeting to consider applications for minor variance and consent held under the authority of the Planning Act of Ontario. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the proposal that is before us, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the committee, after consultation with the Secretary-Treasurer, will set a new hearing date. No further notice will be provided unless there are changes to the application. In order to conduct an effective and efficient hearing, we have adopted the following process. The owner or authorized agent will be given the opportunity, if so desired, to briefly explain to us the basis of the application, answer any questions that may arise out of the hearing. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for this presentation. You will need to state your full name and address for the record. Any materials submitted to the committee for viewing will remain the property of this committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All persons attending the hearing who wish to support or oppose the application will also have to state their name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for their presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chairperson of the committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will also be at the discretion of the committee. If there are several speakers sharing the same point of view, we would ask you to select a spokesperson to represent the group's opinion. We will hear the views of all the attending individuals. However, covering the same points will not advance your case. The owner or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to comments made by any interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the owner or agent has any concerns found in staff reports, particularly with any proposed conditions, this will be the opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision, and this will mark the end of all discussion. Once the committee makes an oral decision, any person desiring a copy must file with the Secretary-Treasurer at this meeting a written request for notice of the decision. A green sheet is provided for this purpose in the back of the room. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on this list that is used by the local planning appeal tribunal for the giving of any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variance applications and 15 days for consent applications to the applicant, owner, agent, and any other person who files a written request for such a notice. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal this to the local planning appeal tribunal. The last day to do so will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant through written correspondence. We do ask that all people attending this committee be courteous and respectful of the members of the committee, the town staff, and other people in attendance tonight. Our meeting will be video recorded and available for future viewing on the town's YouTube channel. We do ask that you maintain your cellular phones on silent or switched off during this meeting, as they tend to interfere with the audio system. Thank you. We have no regrets this evening, and is there any declaration of pecuniary interests? I'm aware of two. Mr. Charlebois.
Yes, Madam Chair. With respect to CAV A141 2018 at 2960 South Sheridan Way, I will be declaring a conflict on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be declaring a conflict on CAV A 142 at 1414 Burnhamthorpe Road. The applicant's a tenant in one of our company's properties.
Thank you, Mr. Talowski. At this time, I will take any requests for deferral or withdrawal of applications. Is there anyone here who would like to do so? Okay, I will take one at a time. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good evening.
Your name and address for the record and the application that you're here for.
My name is Cleo Isaias.
Can you speak into the mic, please? Thank you.
My name is Cleo Isaias. I'm here with regard to 1414 Bernard Thorpe.
1414 Burnham Thorpe. Yes, this is CAV 142 of 2018. Who is here in attendance for CAV 142 of 2018 for 1414 Burnham Thorpe Road West? Okay, I see no one. So you have read the staff's report and you would like to,
We'd like to defer. Conservation Halton requires a site visit.
okay, very well. Members, they would like to defer in order to give the Conservation Halton a chance to visit the site. All those in support of a deferral? Okay. Okay, your application has been deferred. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. My name is Joe Mante, and I'd like to defer item C, 2457 Ventura Drive.
CAV 139 of 2018 at 2457 Ventura Drive. Is there anyone here in attendance for this application? Okay. I'm assuming you are all in opposition. Yes, okay. Very well. Can you please just, for everyone's sake, just let us know why you would like the deferral and how that would benefit the application?
Sure, we would like to review the plans again.
If you can speak into the
sorry.
mic, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
We would like to look at the plans again.
Okay, I see that the town staff is not in support of the application, and as a whole, they are in support of a couple of the variances. For the benefit of the audience, a deferral actually works for your benefit. If the applicant is going to be looking at the application and resubmitting, you will see changes. Hopefully, some of them will be to your liking. I understand you taking the time this evening to come out here, but as the chairman of this committee, and I will defer to my colleagues to present their opinion, I believe that a deferral, when there's a huge amount of opposition, is actually for the benefit of all. Members, any comments on this? No, I see none. All those in support of a deferral? Okay. Okay, sir, your application has been deferred. I urge you to take a look at the back of the room. There's a lot of hands that came up.
Sure.
Perhaps you could make yourself available, but not in the atrium because the noise does travel, and make yourself available for answering any questions. I'm sure that will help in your application and in the second coming around.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good
I did
evening.
not
My name is Ida Evangelista.
Sorry, I apologize. Just give me one moment.
No worries.
Sorry, good evening.
Good evening.
Can you speak it into the mic, please?
My name is Ida Evangelista
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Evangelista. And you are here for which application?
for CAV A138.
Elmhurst Avenue.
Yes.
Okay. So who is here for CAV 138 of 2018 at 2003 Elmhurst Avenue? Okay. I see a few hands. Are you here in opposition or in support? Opposition. Very well.
I am requesting if a deferral to allow us the opportunity to meet with staff and urban design, planning staff and urban design, and come back at another date.
Perfect.
And also to allow us, I have reviewed the letters of opposition, and I would like the opportunity to actually also talk to the neighbors and try to work things out.
Very well. That's always great to hear. Ms. Evangelista will also take some time to speak to those of you who are in opposition at the end of the room once this matter has been taken into committee, and we appreciate you coming out. But again, like I said to the previous group, a deferral at this time would be best serving to everyone. Members, all those in support of a deferral? Okay, your application has been deferred, and you can get back to the Secretary Treasurer when you're ready to file.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Have a good
you.
evening.
Okay, is this the last application that requests a deferral? Okay, very well. We will proceed with the first application on our agenda tonight. Let's call a CAV 137 of 2018 at 1084 Lakeshore Road. Good evening.
Good evening. Arlene Beaumont, W.E. Outred and Associates. We are the agents for the owners of 1084 Lakeshore Road West. We're here this evening to request 4 variances: front yard setback, both side yard setbacks, and dwelling depth. I'd like to start with
I don't want to interrupt you, Ms. Beaumont. Let me just canvass room to see who is here for application CAV 137 at 1084 Lakeshore Road. You're here in opposition or in support? Support, very well, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Beaumont.
So I've got an aerial photo from Google Maps just showing. Can you guys see this? Oh, there it is.
It's
okay.
coming up. Yes.
So the subject property is this one right here. The reason I wanted to show you all this is because you can see how very well treed this lot is. When I first visited the property, I actually drove right past it because I couldn't find the house on the lot. I just zoomed right past it and had to go back. This is a shot of what you see when you're driving by. Again, you can't even see the house behind these trees. So the first variance, as I mentioned, was for front yard setback. So the front yard setback is to the new front porch. It's 14 meters. The required setback is 19.63. But as you could see from that aerial photo I just had up, the front yard setback for the house on this side is actually further towards the road. So when we move this house, the house on the subject property, up, it will not be in line. It will not even be in line with the house next door. The house on the other side actually faces another street, so it has a different front yard setback requirement. So as you can see from this site plan, the proposed front yard setback is still going to be behind the house on the other side. And again, because of all that tree cover, you're not going to see the house behind the trees. The dwelling depth, the actual dwelling itself does comply with the bylaw requirement. It is under 20 meters, but because the rear porch is covered, we've had to add the rear porch, so we are then in excess of the 20-meter dwelling depth requirement. And in terms of the side yard setbacks, I have outlined in pink the existing dwelling. So you'll see that the new home has basically the same side yard setbacks as the existing dwelling.
Are there any questions of Ms. Beaumont at this time? I see none. Since there's nobody here in opposition, we are prepared to take this matter into committee if you have nothing further to add, and then you are satisfied with the conditions that town staff have suggested.
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen? Oh, and I do have to mention that we do have a letters
One
of
letter of
objection.
objection, yeah.
Yes, one letter of objection on file.
Okay. Madam Chair, having conducted
sorry,
my
Mr. Charles.
having conducted my site visit and reviewed the applicant's written submission as well as their comments here tonight, and also the town's written staff report, which I note that the town is in support of this application. I've also taken into account that just this evening we did receive a letter of objection that spoke quite detailed towards some of the objections. But looking at this particular series of objections from the citizen here, Jeff Aldworth, and then taking into account the staff report, I find myself more influenced by the staff report in terms of the technicalities around these various variances, and also taking into account the presentation, which was great. So I'm going to put forward a motion that this particular variance be accepted as submitted, subject to two conditions. The first condition being that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevations dated August 2018, and also subject to the condition that this approval will expire within 2 years from the date of this decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction, and in cases where a building permit is not required, that the proposed scope of work has not been fully completed.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. Before I ask if there's a discussion on these recommendations, there was someone who walked in late. Ma'am, are you here for application CAV 137 of 2018 for 1084 Lakeshore Road? Okay, perfect. We just wanted to make sure that there were no latecomers that were here for this application. Okay, back to our motion. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? No, I see none. Okay, all those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, CAV 140 of 2018 at 134 Talbot Drive.
Good evening.
Good evening. This mic seems to be giving us a problem this evening, so either you, yes, or you can just speak louder. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Vince Pucci. This is my wife, Rainey Pucci. We're the homeowners at 134 Talbot Drive.
Good evening, Mr. Pucci and Mrs. Pucci. Who is here for CAV 140 of 2018 at 134 Talbot Drive? I see none. Okay, very well. This is your time. We are familiar with the application, and we have done our site visit. Our bylaw allows us to forego with the presentation, but this is your time. You have the hand to comment as you wish. If you're satisfied with the conditions that are set forth by staff, we can take this matter into committee.
Okay, sure. My only comments would be that given the natural landscape of the lot, given that it slopes and it's on a pie, that it's somewhat restricted our preferences in design. And that's why we request the variances for front yard setback and for height.
Very well. And you are familiar with the condition that staff has suggested?
I'm sorry?
Did you read staff's report? Are you familiar with the condition that staff has suggested?
I'm sorry.
We haven't heard anything from...
Okay. It's just that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevations dated July 2018. That's
Yes.
the condition that they have suggested that we attach to your application, should we choose to approve it.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any questions of Mr. Pucci at this time? I see none. Are you satisfied? Do you have any further comments, or can we take this matter into committee?
You take it into committee?
Very well. Mr. Flemington.
Madam Chair, having conducted my site visit and having reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as the town's written staff report, which I noted that staff was in support of, also having taken into account the comments presented by the applicant this evening, and they're noting that there were no written or oral objections from the public, I am prepared to make a motion approving this application as submitted, subject to the following two conditions. That the, sorry. dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevations dated July 2018. And also subject to the condition that the approval will expire 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction, and in cases where a building permit is not required, that the proposed scope of work has not been fully completed.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay. Your application has been approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Charlebois, you are in conflict for the next application, so we thank you. Calling CAV 141 of 2018 at 2960 South Sheridan Way. Good evening. Your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Christian Jatan of 235 York Glen Boulevard. I am a planner with Dillon Consulting, the authorized agent for the Tim Wynn Partnership.
Thank you. Did I hear the last name correctly? Zidan?
Jatan, J-A-T-T-A-N.
Okay. Jatan, thank you. Is there anyone here for application CAV 141 of 2018 at 2960 South Sheridan Way? I see none. Okay. This is the application for the temporary location of the Tim Hortons and the Wendy's to a trailer until the renovations have been completed. We are familiar with the application. Are there any further comments that you'd like to address the committee with?
Yes. So just want to highlight that the temporary trailer is for the use of the restaurant outside of a building. The temporary trailer is considered a vehicle, therefore the use is not permitted outside, so that's what the main variance is for. We've reviewed the site with a traffic engineer at Dillon Consulting and have confirmed that the stacking will be going from 13 cars from 10, so that's an increase of almost 20%. The overall site requires 79 parking spaces. Under the zoning bylaw, we require 42 spaces, with a reduction of 18 spaces for the proposed drive-through realigned stacking. We will still have 61 parking spaces. The overall intent and maneuverability of the site is maintained. The drive aisle, which is one-way driveway, allows the site to circulate appropriately, and the overall site will be a temporary condition between 4 to 6 weeks. So I just wanted to highlight those items before I go over the conditions, which staff have recommended. So the first condition that the trailer be in a general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevations dated September 2018. We are willing to accept that. For number 2, that the applicant submit a traffic memo in relation to the required modifications for the site. We're hoping to have that removed, mainly because that the site is a temporary aspect. The renovations will take place during the holiday season. The restaurant will be going dark, which means that the restaurant will be closed, so the average number of trips per day will be decreased. So we're hoping, we're quite certain that no traffic implications will be negative on the site. So we're just hoping that condition 2 could be removed. And for condition recommendation number 3, that the trailer be removed from the property by December 24th, 2018. We're just hoping to amend that to December 31st, 2018, just to allow a couple extra days of breathing room for the construction crews to roll the trailer off the site. That's all.
I did not hear what you said about the traffic memo.
We're hoping to have that recommendation removed.
You're hoping to have it removed.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to have to hear from staff when it comes to their recommendations. I'm sure there's a good reason why they requested the traffic memo, and as far as the date is concerned, again, I'll leave it up to staff to comment on that.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Essentially, the date of December 24th would be 6 weeks post a potential 20-day appeal period. That'd be the extent of the time frame that the applicant has requested. In terms of the traffic memo, noting that the trailer will be located on site temporarily, they meet the parking requirements and site plan is not required. A full-blown traffic impact study will not be requested by staff. Essentially, what it will do is summarize the planning justification report and the traffic analysis that's been completed into a formalized document for engineering staff to review.
Very well, thank you, sir. Are there any questions of staff or Mr. I'm sorry,
Christian.
Chris? At this time? Mr. Talowski, you have a question?
So just a clarification from staff. So you still want condition number 2 to stand?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the committee, that'd be correct.
And with respect to the change in the date, you said that it was 6 weeks, which was part of what the applicant asked for. I note the variance requested doesn't actually have a time frame, so does staff have a strong feeling either way if the date was changed from the 24th to the 31st?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the committee, no, the extra couple of days would not be opposed by staff.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Mr. Christian, if you have any further comments, we are ready to take this matter into committee.
No further comments.
Thank you. Mr. Talowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm prepared to move that this application be approved as applied for, finding that it really is a technical variance. And I would make that note that there's been no opposition from the community on this application. I'd make the approval subject to all 3 of the conditions that staff have requested, that the trailer be located in general accordance with the drawings dated September 2018. I think the traffic memo is nowhere near as onerous as a full traffic impact study, so I accept staff's position on that you should formalize the discussion. So I would make it subject to the applicant submitting a traffic memo and implementing its required modifications. And thirdly, that the trailer be removed by December 31st. So we'll change that date to give you the extra week that you've requested.
Thank you, Mr. Talowski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, your application has been approved, sir, with these conditions.
Thank you.
Application CAV 143 of 2018 at 337 Douglas Avenue.
Yes, good evening. My name is Rick Mateljan, M-A-T-E-L-J-A-N. My company is called SMDA, and we represent the owners at 337 Douglas Avenue.
Good evening, Mr. Pateldan. Who is here for CAV 143 of 2018 at 337 Douglas Avenue? Oh, jackpot. Are you all here in opposition? Yes, we do have some letters of opposition, objections on file. I'm assuming most of you have submitted one. Okay, so we'll let Mr. Mateldan take his time to review the application with us, and then we'll give you an opportunity to speak. If you do have the same point of views, I would suggest you group them, but we're happy to hear as many of you as needed. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I will point out that I've seen one letter of opposition. If in fact there have been others received by the committee, I haven't seen them.
Yes, sure. Thank you. I appreciate you directing my attention to that, but I would rather not have such outbursts in the meeting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. No, I was just pointing out that I've seen one letter of opposition from the community. If others have been received by the committee, I haven't seen them. I'd like to take you through this. Is a rather complex site. The situation here is that we have a double lot. We have two lots that were created. This of course, is part of the Brentwood subdivision that was developed in the early part of the last century. We have two lots of record on the east side of Douglas Avenue that were purchased by one person. One house built there about 1912. The house straddles the two properties. There is a heritage interest to the house. The house is listed.
It's not working.
And we've been in touch with heritage staff and so on, and they're very, very desirous of seeing the house not be demolished. So if I can look at the plan for a second. So we have the two lots. This is Douglas Avenue on the south side of the property. I'll try to move this up a little bit. So this is Douglas Avenue on the bottom of the page. We have the two lots that are owned by my client, and the present house sits roughly in the center of the property, a little bit further to the south, but it straddles the property lines. The house was built, as I said, about 1912. There were some additions that were put on the house, not atypical for the community. And the house presently sits more or less from the street. The house looks exactly as it did when constructed. The additions are all toward the rear. What the proposal is to take the additions off the house, to lift the house up, move it to one side, and to create a new foundation on the northerly lot, and then to bring the house over to its new location on the northerly lot, and then to recreate an addition and a detached garage behind the house. So looking at the drawing here, the proposal is then to take the house from its location roughly here and to move it to this lot. The gray outline area is the area of the heritage house. The hatched area behind it is the addition that's proposed. Here we have a porch, and at the rear of the site, a little bit further down, right there, we have a detached garage that's accessed via a side driveway with a hammerhead for turning purposes. So we're here before you to ask the committee's consideration for three variances that will allow the movement of the house and the reconstruction of the additions and so on to go forward. I'm going to take the variances in reverse order. The one which is, I think, the most important to the community, and I will point out that we have staff support for these variances. The variance that I think is the most critical here, and the one which I believe the community is going to want to discuss the most, is the request for lot coverage. We have before us a request for 28.68% lot coverage against a bylaw maximum of 19%. The lot coverage numbers in this community are very, very small. I'd like to begin by saying that as far as that lot coverage variance goes, I'd actually like to ask the committee. We of course know there has been some concern in the community, and again, notwithstanding the fact that staff have supported this, we have looked at this again, and we'd like to ask the committee tonight to amend that lot coverage variance. The variance that was circulated was for 28.68%, and we'd like to ask the committee to consider amending that variance to 25.63%, so effectively a 3% reduction. And how we're proposing to achieve that is that there's a covered porch.
Mr. Matilda, did I just hear you correctly? You're requesting to change one of your...
We are requesting to amend the variance down, that's correct.
Okay.
So the variance number 3.
Hold on. So yes, number 3.
Variance number 3 was circulated at 28.68%, and we're asking to amend that variance to 25.63%, so effectively a 3% reduction.
Is planning staff familiar with that request?
I believe they are, yes.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, we received the plans late this afternoon about the proposed modifications.
Do they reflect any changes that we as a committee need to see in terms of...
I brought copies of the amended drawings.
Okay, so you will take us through it?
Yes, certainly.
Okay.
The changes to the drawings are that there's an existing covered porch on the building, and the covered porch is on the north side of the property. As part of the moving of the building, we had wanted to maintain that covered. The covered porch is not original to the building, but as part of the moving of it, we had wanted to maintain that as an amenity, and we had proposed a covered porch located in this area here. We've now taken that covered porch and changed it from being a covered porch to an uncovered porch. So the coverage that used to be attributable to this area is now gone. The other thing that we've done is we've reduced the size of the detached garage. So the detached garage before was a typical one-car garage with a little, about 4-foot wide section on the side for, there was a door there and some areas for storing garbage and so on and so forth. We've taken that away and we've reduced this back now, so this is now just a typical one-car garage.
We are at our 5-minute mark, so I will give you another couple of minutes to wrap up, and then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the changes that I'm before the committee now to ask are to reduce that by that 3%. I'd also like to point out though, in consideration of the number of the lot coverage number and how it gets to 25.63%, there's a significant factor on this site that drives that number higher. And what that is that the zoning bylaw allows 0.60 or effectively 2-foot soffit projection on a house. So the roof is allowed to hang over the walls by 2 feet or 0.6 meters. Once it hangs over beyond that, then the whole of that amount is then covered, is considered part of the lot coverage. In this case, the existing condition is that the soffit projection on the existing roof is 0.68 meters. So we're over by 0.8, which is about 3 inches. The effect of that is that the whole of the soffit projection has to be counted by the zoning under the zoning bylaw. And the effect of that is that it adds 19 square meters to our coverage, which is 3%. So if you take the 25.63% that we're asking the committee for tonight, fully 3% of that is attributable to the projection of the soffit. And if the soffit were only 2.5 or 3 inches smaller, that number would in fact fall away. So that I think is a significant factor which staff is aware of, which I believe is part of the reason why staff were in support of this. That of the lot coverage variance that we're before the committee to ask for, a significant portion of it is a very, very, very technical variance that's driven by the existing heritage condition of the existing roof. So we just wanted to point that out, and that's also the reason for variance number 1, which is to permit an additional 8 centimeters of encroachment into the northerly side yard by the soffit. That's what's driving that, because the building meets the side yard setback requirement at the ground, but that soffit projection is beyond the bylaw maximum by the 8 centimeters. So if I'm short on time, then I can wrap up there. I guess we can let the community speak. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and then I can pick up once the community's had a chance to speak.
Perfect, thank you. Does anyone have any questions to Mr. Mittelden at this time? Mr. Charlebois.
With respect to this soffit, simple question, but did you think of just removing it, or was this something that the Heritage Committee wanted you to keep, or?
That's a complex question. In fact, we did. We proposed that. There was an issue there because there's an existing 3rd story on this building. And the position of staff was that if we did anything at all to the roof, that we would then have to come before the committee to ask for variance to allow the 3rd story, and they didn't believe they could support that. So they in fact, we proposed, in fact, we found a gutter that was a smaller dimension, and we proposed putting that on. In fact, staff asked us not to go down that road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mittelden, with respect to your floor area ratio, you've indicated the removal of an existing addition and then having it replaced. So is your existing floor area ratio essentially the same as your proposed?
It's very slightly below.
Slightly below?
It's very, very slightly below what's existing presently, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
2 questions.
Yeah.
The Secretary General just wanted to substantiate whether you are removing variance 1 altogether. No. He's only changing the third one to
yes,
28.
Variance 1 has to stay. Variance 2, there's no change to variance 2. Variance 3 is the one that we're reducing from 28.68 to 25.63.
We need to change the meter, the numbers of meters squared, so we'll get that from you before we...
Sure, I can work that out for you, certainly.
And the second question is, you still have not received the final heritage permit, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Their process is that, in fact, they want it to come through the community adjustment process first, and we go to Heritage second. So we're actually making a Heritage application on Thursday.
Yeah, so, and indeed, that's one of the conditions that staff had suggested. Are there any questions, further questions? Mr. Charlebois?
I believe you said you had some new drawings which reflected this
Yes, I
reduction
have
in
some
coverage. Do you think we could get them while we're doing this? And just remind me again, because I can't recall if you mentioned it, where did that reduction come from?
Oh, the reduction came because in this area, we had proposed a covered porch. We effectively we're taking a newer covered porch that exists outside the building now and moving it to the rear. So the reduction is because we're taking the covered porch off and making it an uncovered porch, and because we reduced the size of the detached garage.
Okay, right.
By making it narrower. It effectively went from 1.5 car garage to a 1 car garage.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and excuse me, if I may, I have to correct something that I said to Mr. Talosky. He asked about the gross floor area. In fact, the gross floor area is, I'm looking at my zoning chart here, is very slightly higher. The gross floor area, the existing was 42.1. We're adding 0.37% gross floor area, and it's going to 42.47. So the gross floor area is, in fact, very slightly higher than what's existing. The difference is that the coverage of the addition is slightly lower, but the gross floor area is slightly higher.
Are there any further questions of Mr. Meteljan? I see none. So we'll invite the neighbors to address the committee, and then we'll give you an opportunity to answer any of their concerns or comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to go first?
Madam Chair,
Good
my
evening.
name is Alan Holdway. I live next door, 343 Douglas Avenue. The previous speaker, the reason I raised my hand was that the clock wasn't working. So the previous speaker had 6 minutes, actually 8 minutes. So I request just a minor increase in my 5 minutes. Would you grant me that, please?
Let's start with your 5 minutes and see if you need further minutes. I'll be happy to oblige.
so you
I've
would
been
not-
trying to keep track of it on my phone while they fixed it,
Would you-
but I appreciate that, your comments.
Would you consider a minor adjustment in the time?
I just did say so. I said we will consider a minor adjustment, but let's start with your 5 minutes.
Okay, here we go. My wife and I own and live at 343 Douglas Avenue. We are Alan and Rosemary Holdway. We received the application for variance CAVA 143-2018 with less than 10 days to respond. Just as well, we were not out of the country. The impact of moving the 2.5-story 337 Douglas Avenue, a large and 9.9-meter high house, which previously occupied a 100-foot frontage, to within 1.2 meters to our shared lot line on a 50-foot lot, this will substantially reduce our privacy, reduce sunlight, cast shadow on our small home, and negatively impact our current enjoyment of our backyard. On Friday, October the 19th, we received an email complete with a copy of the Oakville Planning Department's conclusions on the above application. It was sent to us by an Oakville friend on a trip 8 time zones away. We should point out that when my wife and I met with the Planning Department, this information was not pointed out to us and how and when we could get a copy. The Planning Department's conclusion addressed to this committee on or before October the 19th reads, in summary, based on the application as submitted, staff are of the opinion that the application satisfies all 4 tests under the Planning Act. Should the committee concur with the staff's opinion, the following condition is requested: that the proposed dwelling is relocated and additions constructed in accordance with the final approved heritage permit to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services. Given this, my wife and I think that the probability that you as a committee, with all due respect, will disagree with this opinion is very, very slim. We recognize a highly likely fait accompli when we see one. Instead, I will use my remaining time to inform all interested citizens of Oakville, our new councillor, the Mayor of Oakville, and beyond that, if necessary. The 4 criteria of a minor variance all are subjective. Not one is objective. Subjective information is based on personal opinions, interpretations, points of view, emotions, and judgment. It is often considered ill-suited for news reporting or decision-making in business or politics. On the other hand, objective information or analysis is fact-based, measurable, and observable. So let's review the facts of number 3 variance request. There is only one fact, which is the Oakville bylaw. As of this very day, it reads, the maximum lot coverage for a dwelling having 2 stories shall be 19%. The request, up until this afternoon, is for 28.68% or a 50.95% increase above the 19% Oakville bylaw on the proposed 50-foot lot. How many people outside of Oakville Town Hall do you know that would consider this to be minor? If the Mayor of Oakville told all employees, we're running a little over our planned expenses, so I'll be asking everyone, including me, to take a minor decrease in our salary of 50.95%. Do you think for 1 nanosecond they would consider that to be minor? We have 2 rational and measurable, non-opinion-based recommendations. 1, if the 19% has in fact become 22%, some say 25, I say then either abide by your existing 19% or change it to what you intend holding to with only a truly measurable, quantified minor variance. The second recommendation is put in place a measurable minor variance, i.e. not to exceed greater than 3% or X% of the stated bylaw and stand by it. The vast majority of reasonable people would not consider any double-digit percentage increase minor, and I suggest that you test this if you don't believe me. The existing decision process, I believe, is unfit for purpose, opinion-based, and intolerable. My mission is to do everything I can to get this changed, bringing it into the 21st century, a process that will be easier to use, justifiable to the most casual observer, fit for purpose, transparent, more consistent, and with measures. In conclusion, My wife and I welcome the new owner, Zachary, and his family to 337 Douglas Avenue. Regardless of this committee's opinion-based decision, we will not allow it to affect us being good neighbours, which it has in other cases in this immediate area, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is a fact. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holdway. Are there any questions of Mr. Holdway at this time? I see none. I will, thank you for your thorough letter. I will make one comment, though. With respect to receiving the comments of staff and looking at the drawings and what the applicant has requested, those are all linked online. In this age of technology that we have, you will get a notification of the application in your mail, but then you will have to go and log on to the network on the Town of Oakville site, and under the Committee of Adjustments, you will find the calendar date for the meeting. So for example, today is October the 22nd. If you click on October 22nd, you will see all of the applications that are going to be heard this evening with the attached links to the staff report, as well as maps and comments.
Okay, I have a couple of questions, if I may.
Go ahead, sir.
When this house is moved, what happens if, in fact, building a basement, the earth subsides and my house slips into it? What happens then?
That's a very good question, and we will have Mr. Meteljan answer that question. So the first question is going to be addressing how that may affect your house. I will go on and say that heritage issues, we defer to Heritage Committee for their expertise in terms of moving the house, in terms of how everything is going to be affected, because they do a thorough study of those issues. Right. But I will have him comment on that question. And what are your other questions?
Can I have a copy of the new proposed?
Sorry, the what?
The drawing, the new drawing, because a new proposal was put forward this afternoon, apparently.
Okay, you may have mine. You can take a look at it. If that's okay with Mr. Meteljan.
Is it possible to get a copy?
Yeah, yeah, yes. The reason we do not hand out copies unless we have consent from the applicant is because these are private documents. So they are for staff to approve, and they are for our purposes in order for us to make our decision. But they are not shared with the public. So it's at his discretion and his applicant's discretion that he does so.
Well, I appreciate that. I bet this is the first we knew about it.
That's fine. That's why it's very prudent of you to attend the meeting so that you can hear all the pertinent information and get all your questions answered in this public forum, and then have the decision that we render explained.
Right. The other thing I'd like to mention to the committee is that, please do not make a judgment on the number of people that come here in defense or against. My observation, I'm retired. Before I was retired, I had a job that took me around the world. We were very lucky that we were here. Many of my neighbors travel also. So to think that they're not here means they don't have an interest. People are very busy. They've got very busy lives.
And we appreciate that, sir. And that's why we have two modes or two platforms in which people can voice their concerns. This meeting, primarily, and through a writing process. Through the Secretary of Treasurer, whether by mail or email. Yes. And we do make every effort to hear everyone's concerns. I'll show you a pile of the comments that we received for another application. All the letters that come through, they come to our attention. We read them. We do our due diligence by visiting the site. However many people attend makes really no difference to us, but it is a red light for us when we see a lot of concern, whether it's via correspondence or in attendance. And I appreciate your comment, so thank you.
One last comment, which is that when I look at the drawings, and they're two decimal places, and yet in the Citizen's Guide, minor means small, no measurement at all. I urge you to consider putting in measurement. Is all of the criteria that you have is all subjective. There is no measure. And yet you've got the bylaw that 19%, but in fact the reality is in our immediate area the average is like 22 to 25. So the question is, what degree do you take from that 19? The minor variance is small. That's almost like asking the question, how long is a piece of string?
Maybe
It's
one of
true.
the planners on our committee can comment on that, but I will say that the measure, that's why we are here as a committee.
But you
We
can
look
see-
at variances, we have 4 tests that we have to apply, and we go by what the bylaw gives and what the variance is requested, and we also have the support of staff who do their due diligence in representing what is being requested in measured form, and that's how we make our decisions.
But again, minor and small is not a measurement. I'm going to do my best to get that changed.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
I
very much.
appreciate your time, and I will call the next member. Did you have anything to say? Did you were looking? No. Okay. Mr. Holdway has made a lot of comments. Did he represent all of you, or is there someone else who would like to address the committee? Okay, go ahead, sir. And my timer is working, so we will set it.
My name is Armin Gottschling. We live at 342 Watson Avenue, which is behind and kitty corner to the subject property. I had a conversation with Mr. Holloway a couple of weeks back, and I actually do agree with him on a number of the points he made. And coincidentally, when we built our house, we went through this same process, and so I don't disagree with him that the process is somewhat questionable. However, on this particular house, I know the house well. We walk our dog past there once or twice a day, and we know the property. Because it is a heritage house, and I strongly believe it should be considered a heritage house, I think in this case, the rules should be, I don't want to use the word bent, but they could possibly be relaxed, because without accommodating for some differences, it's never going to be possible to move that house and develop the property in a more practical sense. And realistically, Oakville is trying to densify the neighborhoods and make improvements, and I think this is a step absolutely in the right direction. And by allowing this house will then get refurbished, become an asset to the neighborhood. Right now, it's pretty rough shape, and it could use a very good facelift. I think that's all I have to say on that.
Is there any questions of Mr. Gottschling at this time? I see none. Thank you, sir, for your submission. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee before we allow Mr. Gottschling to respond to your concerns? Okay, I see none. Mr. Meteljan, there's a few questions I assume you're going to respond to, and then this is your time to respond to all their concerns.
Yes, just thank you. No, I guess a couple things. First of all, of course, as the committee will be aware, the members of the public who clearly aren't a part of this process on a frequent basis won't be aware. But the test under the Planning Act for minor and those kinds of things is not a numerical test, as of course the committee will know. But the residents should be aware that the test is in fact one of impact, and when staff look at this, that what they're not looking at is whether it's over by 3% or 4% or 5%, and 3% is okay and 5% is not. They're looking at impact, and just to give you an example, you can have cases, for example, in South Oakville, where the front yard setback requirement might be 7.5 meters, but the average setback on some of the downtown Oakville streets might be 3 meters. And so, the idea of asking for a variance to go from 7.5 to 3 sounds huge, but in fact, you're bringing it in conformance with the community. And the comments that were made here about the fact that the coverage and the nature of the built form in this community is very varied. and the number that we're requesting this evening at the committee is in fact something that very typically occurs in the community. So it's not as though, from an impact standpoint, it's not as though we're requesting something which is atypical for the community. There are some new homes in the community that in fact have higher numbers than what we're asking for tonight. So that would be my first comment there. I wanted to also make a comment about the points that were raised by Mr. Gottschling, that yes, this is a heritage building. Yes, it is not in the greatest shape, has been in some deteriorating condition for some time, and that by allowing this building to be moved and by allowing it to be refurbished and by allowing it to come back to its sort of glory, if we call it that, because at the time of its construction, it was clearly a very elegant building. There is an advantage there. And what we're effectively doing, yes, we're demolishing the additions that exist and we're recreating them, but we're doing it in virtually the same size and shape and orientation. And so we are taking this building and we are really, from the standpoint of the streetscape, we are making an improvement from the in terms of the effort to restore this and to restore and preserve this heritage building. In terms of the question about what happens to my property and is my building going to fall in the hole and so on and so forth, the town of Oakville, well, there's a process called shoring that involves putting down a temporary wall to protect the adjacent property. The town of Oakville over the last few months has become very rigorous about their requirements there. And in fact, what they've begun doing is when we apply for a building permit or a demolition permit, they in fact, and this is very new, they make us draw a cross-section through the site showing what the excavation is going to be. And for those of you who aren't involved in the construction process, the rule is that an excavation can be vertical for 4 feet. Above 4 feet, it needs to slope back on a 45-degree angle. And so they actually make us draw a cross-section through the site, show the location of the proposed building, show where that foundation cut is going to be, show what that 45-degree angle will look like. And of course, that's an angle for safety. And if we can't meet the angle within the site, which on a site like this is virtually always, then they in fact will require that the site be short. So I can tell you that on that north side where there's the 1.2 meter setback, there's no question that wall is going to have to be short. So that will protect both the building next door and protect the landscaping and so on and so forth, and that will absolutely be a requirement of the town. And the shoring is something which is not just done on an ad hoc basis. Every piece of shoring is designed by an engineer and is not an inexpensive process, but the town does require it. And in this case, I come back to the fact that we'll have no choice but to do that. So those are, I guess, my comments. I'd be happy to answer any more questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Meteljan. Are there any questions? I see none. If you have nothing further to add, we are happy to take this matter into committee.
Thank you.
Okay. Gentlemen, I'm ready for a motion. Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, we heard from 3 members of the community, if we include the letter, and I think I'd like to start there. The letter of objection we had was primarily related to the coverage, and I think the applicant has addressed those concerns by the revisions to his plans, and I think should be thanked for addressing the concerns that are raised by the community or attempting to. The second speaker, Madam Chair, I personally did not find to be overly helpful in my decision making because the focus tended to be more on problems with our process as opposed to problems with the proposal. I do admit that his concerns about his safety of his house are valid, and I think Mr. Meteljan just addressed that adequately. The third speaker, Madam Chair, if I can paraphrase, essentially said the applicant should be applauded, not penalized, for trying to preserve a heritage structure, and that's really where I take my lead on where my motion is coming from. When I look at the three variances, the first variance is the result of trying to preserve a heritage feature, and I do find that to be minor. The second variance, the house that exists today and the house that will exist if approved will effectively be the same size, so I don't see the impact being from that variance. And the third variance, again, with the applicant's reduction to 25.63, if you remove the coverage attributed to, again, the heritage feature, we're down to about 22.5%, which is effectively the coverage that you will find typically in this area, notwithstanding the 19% on the bylaw. So, Madam Chair, having said all that and explaining how I see the input from the community, I'm going to move that the application as revised be approved with the revision and coverage to, just make sure I get this right, 25.63%.
Let me double check my notes. That is correct, yes.
So, Madam Chair, again, I'll move that the application as revised be approved, finding that it meets the test of the Planning Act, and that condition, or conditioned by the proposed dwelling, be relocated and additions constructed in accordance with the final approved heritage permit, and that the approval expire within 2 years if building permit has not issued.
Thank you, Mr. Tulowski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Mr. Charlebois.
Yes, Madam Chair. I'd like to support Mr. Tulowski's statement here, and just by bringing in one thing that for the edification of everybody that's here, in that the objective side of the bylaw does exist. There are distinct measurements, for example, this 19% coverage. It's just that the town of Oakville and its approach to things permits every resident to say, hey, I've got an exception, what about me, whatever. And for that reason, it comes in front of us 5 volunteers here who are ourselves residents of Oakville to try and make that determination. In other words, the town can't say yes or no. In this particular case, too, I find myself, when I'm looking at it, trying to balance a variety of different things. I've got the provincial guidelines, which are essentially asking the town, not asking, but basically requiring the town of Oakville to create density where it can. In other words, if a building is straddling 2 lots and you can create 2 lots and create a new building, the province mandates the town of Oakville to do that. I have the Heritage Committee asking to preserve this particular house. I have the town of Oakville's comments, which you've read here. I've got the applicant wanting certain things. And then I've got the residents, obviously in this case, not all that happy with what's going on. So I find myself in a balancing act, which is exactly where we're always placed in this thing, about trying to find the appropriate balance. And in this particular case, the idea that the house effectively is remaining the same, but being relocated to a lot, therefore creating a new lot, solves the provincial problem. The fact that the house, again, is staying relatively the same except for some stuff that's being torn down and replaced, solves the heritage problem. The town is in support of this. Obviously, the applicant's in support of this. And I understand that the resident is not. I need to take into account all of this stuff, and for that reason, though, I find myself being swayed by the requirements of the province and the town and the applicant, not to say that the residents' comments are not correct. It's just a balancing.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. Are there any further comments? I see none. All those in support of this application? The application has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Metaljan.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. We are down to the last application. CAV 144 of 2018 at 22 George Street. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Terry Martino with Grenweiss Architect and Associates, and we are the agents for the applicant.
Ladies and gentlemen, the noise does carry here. Excuse me. Ladies, gentlemen, I don't think they can even hear me. Excuse me. Mr. Metaljan. Mr. Lee. I apologize for that. Let's try this again.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Terry Martino with Grenweiss Architect and Associates, and we are the agents for the applicants at 22 George Street.
Good evening. Who is here for CAV 144 for 22 George Street? Okay, I see none. The floor is yours, Mr. Martino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the interest of time and being the last applicant, I can advise the committee that I've read staff's report and support and agreement with their conclusion. And I have received, or at least have noted, the 2 conditions they've placed on it and happily accept those.
We do have the letters of support on hand. I'm just trying, we have 1 letter of objection as well. Have you had a chance to talk to that individual, or did they change their mind, or no? I don't think so, eh?
Madam Chair, I did not have an opportunity to speak with the neighbor immediately to the east across the street. As I read the letter, I understand their objections to be similar to one of the speakers here earlier tonight with respect to the zoning bylaw and the idea of numerical variances. I would think the one thing I could correct in his statement is that the existing garage had a minor section taken out of it, which is in the plans, to accommodate a laundry room, but my client still uses it as a garage, and it will be connected to the new proposed garage, and they can still park a car in it. So I think that comment was a little in error with respect to that letter. I do have 1 more letter of support from 21 Thomas Street, Mr. Baker, which I'm not sure the committee has.
21 Thomas, yes, we have it.
I guess the only other thing I would like to add is that I met last Friday morning with the chair of the Heritage Committee, Heritage Planner at the town of Oakville, and 2 other committee members to review the proposal. Generally received favorable comments and their support, and are looking to formalize that support at the upcoming Heritage meeting in November.
Very well, thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Martino at this time? I see none. Mr. Martino, if you're satisfied with the conditions that staff have recommended, we can take this matter into committee.
I am, thank you, yes.
Thank you. Gentlemen, Mr. Hardcastle, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having reviewed the materials, including the staff report, the comments from the applicant, and acknowledging the several letters of support and the 1 letter of objection, I'm satisfied that the requested variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act. I'll put forward a motion of approval, and that motion would be subject to 3 conditions. The first being that the addition be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation dated October 2nd, 2018. The second being that the applicant receive a heritage permit from the Director of Planning Services prior to construction. And the third being that the approval expires within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction, and in cases where a building permit is not required, that the proposed scope of work has not been completed.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the recommendation has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Martino. The application has been approved.
Thank you kindly.
We have minutes to confirm for October 2nd. Mr. Charlebois will move the minutes for October 2nd.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll move the minutes. I will put forward a motion to adjourn also.
Mr. Charlebois, thank you. Ian had his hand up.